Art Discovery Series has become really fun. People really enjoy coming, and we thank you all for being here today. We have so many marvelous artists in the tent, but we've selected 4 today that not only are they great representation of the Western and Southwestern art, but they all have a true heart to tell the story and a connection to the West. So we've assembled, it's going to be hard to, there's a lot of people that like to talk here today. Which is a good thing. So I'll just start, I'm on this end today, which is different, but right next to me is Joe Netherwood, who lives right here in the metro area, and I've known Joe for many, many years, and I know he's got a lot of stories, so we're going to love that. And then right next to him is Sandy Sharmantaro. Wow, this is going to be an all-local panel. We haven't had one of those. So Sandy also is here in the Valley, and I'll backtrack to Joe is a painter. We haven't branched into sculpting yet. No, not yet. But Sandy paints, sculpts, and paints in watercolor and oil. And next to her is Randy Galloway, who's also right here local. And Randy's been a painter for many years, and 2 years ago he just picked up some clay last year, and it's like he's been doing it forever. So it's really fun to see him translate from 2-dimensional into 3-dimensional. So you'll probably talk about that. And next to him is Kurt Mattson, who triple threat, quadruple threat, sculpts in bronze, or sculpts cast in bronze, and you know, it's hard to really sculpt in bronze. That would be quite a thing. That would be like take a long time. And then you paint in watercolor, oil, and you also draw. So really fun. And again, we're going to have some great stories. So that's the overview of who they are, and it's always fun for them to. I always ask you to start by telling us a little bit about you, why you love art, and specifically why Western art is your mojo. So let's go down the row, and Randy and Sandy, you can share that mic, and I'm going to come back over here and hang out with Kurt. So you go, Joe.
Hello everybody, and welcome today. Thank you for coming out here. We appreciate you coming out on this chilly, windy day, and we hope you're going to enjoy yourselves. I guarantee you will, because I know all 3 of these characters, and let me tell you, they got some good stories to tell. I have grown up since I was a small child wanting to be an artist, thinking I was going to be an artist, and I didn't have the opportunity to be a fine artist until I was 43 years old. I'd been a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a draftsman for 10 years for Allied Chemical back in Virginia. That's where I grew up. And you're saying, Virginia, why are you doing Western art? Well, I'll tell you, I was in Philadelphia at the time, where my wife and I lived before we moved here. And we went to a show at the Brandywine River Museum in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, and they had a showing of early work by N.C. Wyatt, who was a famous illustrator around the turn of the century, not the last one, but the one before that, 1900. And they had all his original work, and I went to this show, and my head exploded. I just said, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So thank God my wife had a job, and she said, go ahead, take a shot. And I said, okay, I will. At the time, I was working for Lippincott Publishing as a graphic designer, doing a lot of their cover work. And at night, believe it or not, I was doing stand-up comedy. I did that for 5 years, up and down the East Coast in Philadelphia. So I had a really good time doing that. And the comedy business had taken a downturn at that time, and I went, this is the perfect time to go into art. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know there was a Western art market, a current one, until I started seeing the art magazines on the newsstand back then, Art of the West and Southwest Art, and I went, wow, people are doing this for a living, and this is great, this is what I want to do. After 2 years of painting, I got invited to do some shows out here at the Pippin Museum and a couple of other places and up in Prescott. And I came out, fell in love with Arizona, brought my wife out for a 3-week vacation. She fell in love with the place, and she said, I think this would be a good place for us to move to. And I went, thank you, Lord. I appreciate that. So we did. After a couple of years, we moved out here. We've been out here 21 years now, and I probably talked too long already, so I'll pass the mic over to Sandy and let her tell her story. Sandy?
Hi there, I'm Sandy Sharmantaro, and I'm also a Phoenician. For about 20-some years. Prior to that, I was a designer at General Motors for 15 years and left as the coordinator for small truck. So when I came to Arizona, it was immediate love. The desert calls me. I like to go into places that are, the paths aren't there yet, and I don't create them, I leave them as they are when I'm out, but they're spectacular. So it allows people to see places they wouldn't normally see, and they stay undisturbed and gorgeous. What I do is I spend the majority of my year doing research. I'm a historic preservationist artist, so I either work from history or real life. And so I will spend an enormous amount of time in museums, working with curators and getting permissions, copyrights, and all of that good stuff, red tape, and come out with pieces that have not been done before. And I like to share that because it's real life from back in the day. And then, speaking of real life, I'll show you right here. This is a piece from real life right out here. So this is Tick and Truitt. And what happened was I was up at R Rescue, and I was drawing the mini donkeys and loving up the animals. And as I was doing that, a young boy named Truitt, 4 years old, long lineage of Cowboys from Arizona, walks up, throws a bunch of hay in his back pocket, and tells his dad, he's following us home, we gotta keep him. And this is called, If He Follows Me Home, Can We Keep Him, Pa? And they did rescue Tick that day. And so very quickly, as it was happening, I took my phone out to ask his dad, is it okay if I take a shot and photo? And he said, sure. And that is exactly as it was. If you check out my studio, you'll see the actual photo. And Tick and Truitt, you will see, this is the first in the series, and you'll see them growing up together through the years. And 5% of everything I do related to Tick and Truitt goes back to the rescue and takes care of little mini donkeys and horses and the rest of the animals that are there. So enjoy the history and ask any questions you like when you come on down to the studio. Thank you.
I wanted to let you know that we arranged for the wind to kind of help make us feel like we're back in the West, so enjoy. All right, Randy.
Okay, my name's Randy Galloway, and I'm from New Mexico, originally born in Carlsbad, but then we moved to Albuquerque. And I was interested in Native American things ever since I was a little kid in school. I used to carve kachina dolls, and I'd go out and cut the cottonwood root out of the ground and carve the kachina dolls. And once I got into junior high, I had an anthropology teacher. He wanted to buy my kachina dolls, so then I was a professional artist making money. And my great-grandmother was full-blood Cherokee from Fannin County, Georgia. And then when she had her kids, they all had a whole bunch. They all moved up to West Virginia and worked at the steel mills. So my dad was the only one that came out west, and it was because he had lung disease and needed to be in the dry climate. And so that's how I ended up being in New Mexico. But there was nobody in our family that had any kind of art background at all. So I was a total bizarre anomaly when I came out of the chute drawn right away. I entered drawings and paintings and things in all of the local state fair and stuff, but never really had much training with it because the art classes back then were kind of a waste, and they were mostly just the stoned kids throwing clay at each other. And so I skipped all of that and I took drafting classes. So that can probably give you a little reasoning behind why my things are so detailed and tight, because I started out doing the drafting and everything had to be super exact. And I had really great eyesight, and I liked doing little tiny things that were super detailed. And then when I went off to college, that was really my first exposure to art, and I just fell in love with everything to do with art. And got my degree in graphic design with a minor in painting, because I knew someday I wanted to paint, but I knew that I had to get a job. So that was Vietnam time, and it was good to have a college deferment. And I worked for like 33 years as an art director. And it was just always in the back of my mind that I wanted to paint, I wanted to paint, I wanted to get out of the rat race of the design world and the advertising world. And then turns out my brother all of a sudden died of melanoma. And we grew up in New Mexico in that sun. And I was always into sports and was a lifeguard, was on the swimming team, and I thought, oh man, that should have been me. I was in the sun all the time. So then I said, okay, when I turn 50, I'm gonna start getting rid of my clients and starting to transition over. So it took me a few years after that to really switch all the way over and start painting. And I had to make a decision, because in the art world, you kind of get pigeonholed right away with what you choose to do. And since I was older, I knew I didn't have much time to mess around. So I thought, well, I really liked life drawing classes and everything figurative when I was in school. So I thought, well, I could go with the figurative and nudes and some things like that. Or I could go wildlife. I really liked wildlife. And then I also had the Western background, and I liked the Western stuff. And so, you know, my brain's saying, naked ladies, naked ladies, naked ladies. But my common sense was saying, go with the Western art. So I went with the Western art. And I've been doing that for the last 12, 13 years. So, hand it off.
He seems like such a quiet guy. And by the way, you only look like you're 50 now, so that's something, you must do something right.
By the way, his brain is still saying naked ladies, naked ladies, naked ladies.
Still the stand-up comic. Okay, we'll move on to my friend Kurt. Tell us your background, and then we'll get into some of the fun stuff.
Howdy, folks. I grew up in the horse business. Everything I do is driven by the horse and human relationship and what that really means. So when I worked ranches from California to Alberta. We used to show cutting horses, reiners. I've done everything horseback that you can do. And I just love these ponies because those horses will change your life. And so what happened, we were in 1979, we would haul for the state championships to qualify for the world. And we'd go to Oklahoma City every year for the world championships. So off we went in 1979, and you know, here's how bright I was. I had no idea anybody was making a living with cowboy art. I didn't know people were doing it because I thought Russell and Remington had ended there, and there was a guy I saw at Cowboy Hall of Fame, and his name was Edward Boreen. And so when we walked into the Cowboy Hall of Fame, the first thing I saw was End of the Trail. And you know, that's the one with the old Indian up there and he's all slipped over on the horse and it's 18 feet tall. And I saw, good grief, and I love that horse. And then I went into their permanent collection and here was an Edward Boreen drawing of these old Californios and they were working these longhorn cattle. I mean, spade bits, big eagle bill taps, all the stuff that is true of the Californio and of that vaquero horsemanship. And see, that's my background. And so for 3 years, I went to Alberta, then I went back down, and I ended up running a ranch in Northern California. And by 1983, it was just like, you know, this whole thing of doing cowboy art and leaving a record, and, you know, here's what happens. You know, horse trainers, most horse trainers end up broken and broke. And I figured, you know, as an artist, I might be broke, I won't be busted up, and I can stay horseback longer, you know? So, and there's all of these stories of the West, and of these horses, and of what good horsemanship is, and the partnerships that develop. And so that's what I started to really pursue, was that. And ever since then, it's just been a steady learning curve. I'm a slow learner, I just keep plodding away, you know, but you can tell these stories. It's part of our heritage as Americans, and being able to leave that record, and that's what got it all started. It all revolves, everything revolves around horse stories. So that's, in a nutshell, the whole scoop there.
Awesome. Okay, you're bringing a shirt. So I'm going to go back to Sandy.
Oh, okay.
Because you have, and every one of you, what I think would be really fun now is to hear we've gotten the backstory and some of the inspiration, but tell us about some of the moments. Like, you have a lot, but I remember the Navajo experience you had. Can you share a little bit about that and how that inspired your work in both the painting and the sculpting? You know what I'm talking
matriarch?
about? Yes, please.
I have been always painting in canyon to shape. Love Canyon de Chelly, epic place. I get lost there. A friend of mine is a translator there. She's pure Navajo. And she kept telling me for years, my grandmother really wants to meet you. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And it just never happened. And so then finally, one year, it happened. It was just 2 years ago. And she walked up and I went, oh my goodness. So she's a matriarch of Canyon de Chelly, who knew? And I just looked at her, I thought she was beautiful. So we talked for a few minutes and I asked her, would it be okay if I painted or bronzed you? Or actually, I just painted you. And she said, well, let me see. Do you have hardworking hands? And this is in Navajo, this is all being translated. And I said, oh, we're in, here you go. And so she said, okay. And so as we talked for hours, if you haven't noticed, as we talked, we were just having the best time. I'm from Tuscany. My family goes back to the 15th century. Her family goes back forever. The commonalities, though worlds apart, just amazing. So as we got talking, laughing, we were having the best time. And I asked her, you know, I really want to paint you, but I would love to make you a bronze. And she's like, mm-hmm. And I said, would it be possible to paint you or bronze you the way you truly are? Laughing and smiling, because you never see that. And she said, only if I'm thinking good thoughts. And I said, then that shall be the name. And so if you go into the studio, you will see that there's a painting when we first met, and that is her very reverent, respectful painting. And then you'll see the sculpted bronze with her laughing and smiling. And that's good thoughts. And that is truly heart of hearts, the way that that woman that is in her late 90s that has seen so much truly is. And I said, well, she said, well, you can paint in bronze, but you do it with respect. And so I said, then this shall be the With Respect series. And then she said, well, there's one last thing. You must put my peach tree in. And I said, okay, why is that? And she said, because back in the day, when we were made to leave the canyon, they cut down thousands of the peach trees and took away our sheep, and then we were made to leave. But when I was a small girl, down in the canyon, they have a hogan at the bottom and the hogan at the top, a hole at the bottom and the top. And she said, I found a seed, and I took that seed and I planted it next to the door of our hogan here at the top. And there is this massive peach tree, just absolutely massive. And that was her sign of independence. And she is back in the canyon. That matriarch walks up and down that canyon and just is an amazing woman. And so that's how the matriarch came about.
Thank you. Isn't that great? So, what a great joy for you to be able to share that story that we may not have ever known through both your words and your art, and the strength that you learned from her in that experience. So
Definitely.
I think we know what lights your fire.
Absolutely.
So, and you do primarily Native American culture in your artwork.
I do. History. Like I said, I'm a historic preservationist artist. So I feel that it's so important to preserve history because it will soon be gone. You see it disappearing. But when we create that piece, whether it's painted or whether it's in bronze, it's there forever. And that's what I feel my responsibility is to tell that story. Speaking of which, since we know I'm short-winded, if you look at the back of my paintings, in fact, there's a 7-foot painting, you'll see the story is written about Walpi First Mesa, written this small on the entire back of that 7-foot painting. So it is extremely important to me, as my responsibility as a historic preservation artist, is to tell their story that they tell me or that we know today.
You get a book with it. That's
Yes.
a bonus.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And then I think we'll bounce back to Joe and then Randy. I know you guys do both Cowboys and Indians. and kind of the whole Western story. So speak to that, and also maybe, I know you both go to an event where you are able to experience, you know, replication of Western life. So kind of, if you will, share about each of that. You, Joe.
What Susan is referring to are artist photo shoots. There are several of these held around the country. Primarily, there's one in South Dakota every August. It's called the Artist Ride. It's been going on for over 25 years. And about 50 artists come there every summer, and they bring in models from the Lakota reservations and Cowboys and mountain men reenactors, and we all get together. They have buffalo there, they have cattle there, they have horses, wagons, and everything, and we just trail all over South Dakota Ranch there and just shoot thousands of photographs. And it's great to have digital photography, because every time you change the roll of film, something cool would happen, and you miss it out every time. It just frustrates the heck out of you. And the one thing that I like to do in my art is I like to show the diversity of the West, because you don't see a lot of that. And I've done several paintings of African American or black cowboys. And the first one I ever did, I did here at Celebration of Fine Art a number of years ago. And I said to my wife, I said, I don't know if anybody's going to buy this, or if, you know, if it has any appeal or not. And it was big. It was 40 by 30. And one day, this African-American couple came in, and they were looking at it, and they were standing, and they had their heads together, and I could tell they were talking about it, and I was just dying to know what they were saying. And finally, after about 5 minutes, the lady in the couple turned and looked at me, and she said, "Thanks for showing we were here too." And that just touched my heart, and it made it all worthwhile to me, and I've been doing that ever since. And there's not that many people that do that kind of, you know, subject matter in this business. It's maybe 4 or 5 max. So, Brady, what would you like to say, sir?
Well, when I first decided to switch over from design, I had started in this show back in 2001. I only did it 1 year because I still had my full-time job as a designer, and so I almost killed myself, because I would come in here and I would be here from 10 to 6, and then I would race home and I'd stay up till 2 or 3 at night doing all of my design stuff. I'd get up after 2-3 hours of sleep, run downtown to the printers, everything I had to do with my design stuff, and get back over here. But I was so determined to switch my life that by the end of the show, I had gotten walking pneumonia and was in the hospital and just about ended the whole story. And then I decided, well, I guess I'm not ready for this. I need to just decide what I'm going to do. So I thought, well, I'll gradually get out of some of my design stuff. I'll start going to the artist ride, get a bunch of reference, start building up my paintings, and then, you know, when the time is right, I'll cut it off and be ready to really do it. But that's where I really got a lot of great reference and really fell in love, and totally was happy that I had gone the Western way, was when I went to the artist ride. And I ended up going there for 4 or 5 years, and now I have over 9,000 incredible photos that every one could be a spectacular painting. And so it's impossible to decide what you're going to paint next. So sometimes I'll have a landscape, and the next time I'll do a mountain man, and then I'll look through the stuff and I'll go, well, I did the guy, I better do a girl, so then I'll do a cowgirl, or I'll do a Native American woman, bounce all around. But I really like that, because I figured I didn't have to get that tight on what I wanted to do, because at that point I was too old to just, you know, say, well, I'm gonna focus on this one thing and become famous doing that. I was like, well, I'm gonna have fun. I'm just gonna do what I like, the things that really inspire me, and I'll just jump all over the place and do cool images that I really like. So it's kind of confusing when people see my stuff, because they go, what's he doing that for? But I was used to doing, with my commercial stuff, I do magazine articles and book covers for paintings, and a lot of computer graphics and stuff. So I really jumped all over. I had clients that did machine tooling, and, you know, the Desert Botanical Garden was one of my clients for 11 years. Did all kinds of things for them. So I really had a diverse background, and now even I'll do commissions for people, all kinds of things. If you come in my booth now, I have a commission for a man that he's bought several of my paintings over the last 10 years, and he wanted me to do his favorite fishing hole back in North Carolina and put his grandsons in there because they've had 3 generations of fishing that water hole. So, you know, I love that because I really consider myself a portrait artist, but character portraits. So I don't mind doing the portraits that way. And then with the landscape, I'm used to doing landscapes. So that worked out great.
So I have 2 questions for you. One is the big commission you did last year of and it was almost like doing abstract. And then you brought this piece, and one thing, Randy is really excellent at doing the night sky. And I think it's interesting that you picked one that had that. So can you maybe speak to a little bit about both that massive commission you did and what is it about the night skies that attract you?
Yeah, last year I got a commission to do a piece, and it was 7 feet wide, and she just had a little 4x6 print, and she said, I took this on my family farm, and it was this picture, and the sun was almost down, and it was a cornfield after it had been plowed, and it was her nieces and nephews holding hands running down the rows of the cornfield, and off in the distance was the combine and the truck, and those were her brother and her brother's son and then his kids. So she wanted me to do that, and I said, well, is this all you got, is this photo? Because the whole bottom section was almost black because the sun was going down. And she said, well, I took it with my phone, so I think I can get you the image off of the phone. So at least that was good enough that I could lighten it up and get something, but I really struggled doing that piece because you can imagine how complex a chewed up cornfield is, and to try to build that depth, because it really relied on the foreground being in focus and then gradually get out of focus where those kids were running off in the distance, and then the sun going down with the glow in the background. And it ended up taking me 7 weeks, and just was unbelievable struggle to get through that thing. But you know, I'll do just about anything, and it still kind of fits in with the West, you know. And then this one here, the title is Twisted Fire, because that's what I call my studio, is Twisted Fire Studio. When I first started doing this, I needed to pick a name, and I went around and around with all kinds of stuff, and then I thought, well, a twisted fire, the fire is an iconic image of the Old West. There's fire in every old Western movie, there's all kinds of fires, and I thought, well, the twisted fire, I love it whenever I was out camping, just to sit and stare at a twisted, crackling fire. But I thought, well, it really fits with my life, because I've gone through all these twists and turns trying to get to the point of doing the paintings that I wanted to do, and I thought that would be a great thing. So I had to do a painting called Twisted Fire. So that was one of the images that I shot out at the Artist Ride. A little Lakota boy there with the stick playing in the fire.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Matson, you've got some of the best stories I know about chasing on your horses, chasing broken things. So tell us about some of your favorite pieces of what inspired you.
All right. Yeah, I bet. Well, you know, everything, let's say, comes, I've been in the middle of all of these situations with these horses, these cows, and you know, like I say, we're horseback every day, so there's always something that's coming up. And being able to share those things, I've got a piece over there, well, I can tell you 2 things. First of all, this little piece we have over here on the side, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that thing's called View from the Top, and let me tell you, that's a personal experience. I was riding for a cutting horse man, and this is over in Riverside, and this guy was one of the world champion cutters back in the 60s. And we had a stud horse named Polka Stripe, and we had a daughter of his who was out of a Beaver Creek mare. Now these Beaver Creek horses were tough. They were 14.2 tall and 14.2 wide, you know. And what I didn't know, and I looked at this mare, and I thought, he tells me one day, he walks out to the round corral, and he says, you know, maybe you ought to just try to step on this mare, you know. And he didn't tell me he tried to start her a couple of times. So I thought, okay, yeah, I'll ride anything. And now remember, this mare is pig-eyed and she's pin-eared. Pig-eyed means she has little bitty eyes. Pin-ears mean that they come up and they almost touch monkey. would have been nice to know, you know. And that was the only mare. I've started tons of horses over the years. That was the only mare I could never get the buck out. But she was just tougher to boot and really great. And I've got a piece over there, a big piece called Dealing with a Bolter. Now, a bolter is a horse that when you are out and you're gathering your bunching cows and you're driving, if they're driving wild cattle, and here in Arizona, boy, I'll tell you, up in these hills back here and up behind where we are in Cape Creek, there's a lot of wild cattle out there. And there's the guys that specialize in going into the ranches and pulling them out. Well, a bolter is one when you pull them out, they keep trying to bolt to go back, right? They want to get back out there and they test you on every way. And what they do is, the rest of the herd gets all agitated because it's like, I want to go with them. Well, you want to keep them lined up, moving easy, because remember, every time you stress a cow, she loses weight, and every pound, every time she stresses and loses weight, that's money out of your pocket if you're a rancher. So you want to handle them nice and quiet. So these bolters are proud. So what the old vaqueros would do is they'd run up, now remember, 60-foot rayada. Now this horse is riding, is a youngster, he's a 4-year-old, he's got a hackmore on, okay? So he rides up and you would rope him with your rayada, and then what you do is you kick out the end of your rope, not left-handed, so you do this. You kick out the end of your rope around the hip of that steer, and then you send your horse this direction while the steer's going this direction. What that does is it knocks him down, knocks the wind out of him. You stop your horse, flip him around, go back, pull your rayada off, and you say, okay, buddy, back in a herd. And those son of a guns won't do that again to you. So that's what dealing with the bolter's all about. That's how you deal with some of the old bronky cows, you know, that just are gonna give you all kinds of fits.
That's how I deal with artists that get out of my head. Do you wish he was a little bit more animated?
Susan, I have to tell you, my favorite ride was Trigger outside the A&P, but you had to put a dime in the box.
I love my job. I love you guys. One thing, you know everything about every year of every saddle and every bit and bridle, and I'm going to take a moment to do a commercial. I meant to call our friends at the Scottsdale Museum of the West. How many of you have been there? Isn't that a great museum? So if you haven't, it's right at Marshall and Main, right in downtown Scottsdale, in the heart of the art district. I highly recommend going there. The exhibits are beautiful. One of the things they have that's so fascinating is they have this whole exhibit of saddles, bridles, bits, spurs, and just tons of information. It would be really fun to go with some of these people, but do you agree?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you want to see it. It's Abe Hayes' collection. Now, Abe Hayes is one of the major collectors here in Arizona. He's got, remember this, when you look at a piece of cowboy art, you should be able to tell where the cowboy's from by his gear, okay? Buckaroos, I do a lot of buckaroos. That's what he is. That's my background. Flat hats, slick fork saddles, meaning wades or 3B Visayas, rayadas, that kind of thing. So you can see, yeah, there you go. See the flat hat? And he's got chink leggings, which are a shorter legging, okay? See those 26-inch Eagle Bill taps? That's what's on the stirrup here. There you go. Nope, there you go. So all of that is indicative of the buckaroo. You won't see it here in Arizona. Arizona, you're going to see more of a Marlboro Man hat, modified association trees, which is like a tree they ride in the rodeos with a horn, and shafts that are bat wings and that kind of thing. And so when you look at these saddles, if you're looking at that Abe Hayes collection, he's got some Visayas. Now, a Visalia saddle is a slick fork. It was built, these are going to be from 1800s all the way up into the early 1900s. They're center fires, meaning they have 1 cinch. The vaquero rode with a center fire saddle. So instead of having 2 cinches, which is one up by the fork and one up by the back of the cantle, which is a 7/8 rig, they're going to, see that's what he has. You can see 2 cinches on there. Most of the guys today are riding with 2 cinches. The old vaquero of old had a center fire. And so your saddles tell you that. Your chink armidas will tell you, or armidas I should say, will tell you it's a buckaroo. You'll start to see them here in Arizona, but they're not as common. And so your regions will tell you this. Saddle styles, leggings, and if you go from 1900 to 1930, the saddles were particularly interesting. Once you hit 1930, the cantles start to move down, and by 1950, you've got an 1.5 inch cantle with these kind of a crummy looking little saddles, and they're just altogether different. But when you look at all this stuff, and you go to the museum, you'll see some of these period pieces, spade bits, half-breeds, all the different kinds of stuff that they use. And that tells you the era and the type of cowboy that would have been using.
Isn't that fascinating? And you know, for those of us who didn't grow up in that world, we would just think, you know, a saddle is a saddle. a bridle's a bridle, but there's a lot that goes into it. You also do Adel George and Booth Museum. I think it's really clear that one of the things they all feel passionate about is sharing the stories and history and capturing that. Do you have favorite museums that you've been to besides the Museum of the West right here in our own town, but where you feel people could really be inspired? And before we go on, would you like me to turn the heat on? Yes? No? Yes. Enough yeses. We'll do it and use our microphones very well. Okay? Yes? Yes, that's Joe Netherwood. And why did you select that one to bring to us today, Joe?
That piece is called Blackfoot Noble, and he has got one of the best faces I've ever encountered when I've traveled around the country of a Native American. And if you combine the character and just the handsomeness of that face, to me it's like a classic face. It could have been from 100 years ago, or it could be today, and it is today. And then when you put that buffalo headdress on top of it, that's just a winning combination. It just knocked me out, and I thought a painting of it would knock somebody else out.
So I think probably any of you could speak to, like, we've been hearing about the cowboy way and the different saddles and such. I know that each Native American culture has very different regalia that they wear and so forth. I was looking at Todd's Crow Warrior and the specifics about him and how he paints his face and so forth. Can you guys speak a little bit to that, to share that information with the crew here?
Well, like you said, there were hundreds of tribes, and it's impossible to know. There's nobody that knows everything about every tribe, because most of them didn't have any kind of written language, so that was only handed down by mouth. And like now, the younger generations don't carry on much of the culture at all. And I was lucky when I worked for the Desert Botanical Garden doing design. I got a commission to do a whole series of paintings for their one trail called Plants and People of the Sonoran Desert. And it explained what they used all the plants for and all the different tribes. And so there was the Pima and the Hodum and the Apache. And the guy that I was working with from the Apache tribe, everything had to be okayed once I drew it out. It had to be sent around to everybody from all the different tribes to make sure that everything was accurate. Well, he said, hey, my goddaughter has picked me and my wife to go through the sunrise ceremony on the Apache reservation. You want to come out and see it? And I said, awesome, sure, what do I do? And he goes, well, here's the directions. You got to drive way out into the mountains and it's out on dirt road in the Apache reservation. He said, you got to be there at night. He says, everybody sleeps in their car, and then the women start to make breakfast about 4 in the morning, and the ceremony starts. The medicine man takes the girl and her girlfriend. She picks a friend to go with her, and they're dressed in traditional, beautiful dress, and they start dancing in the dark, and the medicine man's playing the drum and singing and chanting. And they came by and knocked on the windows of the cars and woke us all up, and it was cold. Get up there and you're up in the mountains, and then the women start making these giant, big, huge native burritos for everybody. And then I keep walking over looking to see what's going on, and it's just barely starting to get a little bit light. And the whole idea was it's a coming of age ceremony. So she has to dance the entire day and look right into the sun. So the sun comes up over the mountain and she has to be staring right into it. And so by the time the sun comes up, all the relatives and all her friends are all coming. They're driving in there to the area, and they're all bringing different gifts for her. And they start lining them up in front of her. And it went for like a quarter mile of all kinds of stuff. And it was, things that young kids would like, big case of Coca-Cola and stuff like that. So it wasn't all traditional old things, because it was stuff that she would use now. But then everybody gets in a huge circle, and then they you go through the whole ceremony, and the whole time you have to dance back and forth, and you're keeping the beat with the music. And the medicine man is drumming, and the family's going through all the different parts of the ceremony. And I had asked the medicine man in the beginning, I told him I was an artist and asked him if I could take photos, and he said, yeah, it'd be okay. That they give some leeway to the artist. Even though I was a blue-eyed white guy, he could see, you know. And so I got great photos from that, and I've done a couple pieces from that. But it was just an unbelievable thing to be part of that, because it doesn't happen very often. Because even he said, the Apache guy I worked with, he said it was the first time in his whole life, and he was about 50 years old, that he had seen that ceremony.
Those are the... Wow, they haven't done that for a while. Those are the F-18s, I think, that... Yeah, by the time we hear them, they're over.
Welcome to the Aviation Art Exhibit here at the Celebration of Fine Art. Thank you.
Yeah.
Our year-round, 3 of them, our year-round offices in the air park, and they do land and take off there several, and like the whole windows will rattle. But really, by the time you hear them and you go out to look at them, they're long gone. Anyway, modern America.
Yeah. Anyway, what we were talking about was the different cultures and things with the tribes. So that was one where I got firsthand experience on it and got to see all that. But right next to me were all of her girlfriends dancing. And they were just in blue jeans and sweatshirts and stuff. And I asked one of the girls, I said, are you going to do this? And she said, no way. There's no way my parents are going to talk me into doing this. You know, so that girl, it was really rare that she do it, but it was just beautiful. It was incredible to see the whole thing and be part of it. But, no. And it's because, you know, I'm kind of in a different world here, you know, than back on the Apache Reservation. So I should do that. I should contact the botanical garden and see if Ken, the guy I worked with, is still in touch with her family. And, you know, I could make a print or something of one of those drawings, and that'd be a good idea to give her one of those drawings, you know.
So you did sell the painting of the Black Cowboy?
It was bought by one of the major supporters of the Scottsdale Museum of the West. I've never been heckled from 3,000 feet above before.
You're having fun.
It was bought by one of the major supporters of the Scottsdale Museum of the West. He's John Coleman's #1 collector, and he has it in his collection. He has loaned it to them, and it has been on display there before. It's not right now, but thank you for asking.
So a couple other places we didn't really cover museums, but locally the Herd Museum is phenomenal for delving more into our Native American culture.
The Cody Museum.
Cody Museum.
In Cody, Wyoming. Absolutely have to see that. It's the most beautiful museum. It'll take you 2 full days to get through it all, but it is spectacular. It's just unbelievable.
Another local museum is the Eddie Bash's Museum down in Chandler. Especially, Eddie Basha was a huge supporter of the Cowboy Artists of America, and he has probably the biggest collection of Cowboy Artists of America. You want to speak to that, Kurt?
Yeah, Eddie Basha was really good friends with Joe Beeler. Now, Joe Beeler was one of the founders of CA. He has the largest collection of Beeler paintings and bronzes of anybody in the United States. He also has, I believe, his largest collection of Howard Turpins. In fact, right now, as the jets fly over, right now, if you guys get to the Scottsdale Museum of the West, they've got a Joe Beeler exhibit that is from Bash's collection, and it's fantastic. You want to go see that. Beeler was one of the really great cowboy artists that's ever lived. He died in '06, I believe. And another little gem here in Arizona, and like I say, if you get to the Cody Museum, Randy's absolutely right. The greatest piece of American sculpture in the world, according to Kurt, it's ever been done is in that museum called the Mares of Diomedes. But don't neglect going out to Wickenburg, to the Wickenburg Museum. The collection of prison bridles and saddles on top of the art, they've got some Frank Henny Johnsons that will just go pow. It's a wonderful collection, and it's 45 minutes away. It's well worth your time to go out there and visit that museum.
Another museum, if you're ever back in the East, you want to see probably one of the biggest collections of Western art and other art, presidential art as well, in the country is at the Booth Museum in Georgia. And it is a giant museum. The last addition they did to it was 90,000 square feet, so I'm not sure how many square feet they have in there now, but it is a fabulous museum and well worth a special trip to go there.
So I've been given special permission by the Museum of Northern Arizona to create certain pieces. And so I'm allowed to make one piece from the historic photos that I have from 1906, 1910, and edition of 25 of the bronze. And so I'm really excited about that. One of the pieces, actually 3 of the pieces are in my studio right now. And that is, I have been to all of the locations that I paint. So the particular one that's on the wall right now is First Mesa, and it's from 1906. And it's just in motion. And if you look at my work, you'll see that I show a different side of that time frame. It's a happy time where people were working together and enjoying each other's company. So you'll find the traders that were working with the Navajo or the Hopi in these paintings, which is something you don't normally see. And you see the joy in the trade, pride, and it's just a moment in time. And that's it.
Great, that's a great museum. And of course, Celebration of Fine Art is like a living museum. You can actually, touch the artist at work. Well, with permission, I suppose. And again, you get their stories, and there's so much. That's one of the things that we love so much about this environment is you don't just get to see it and interpret it, which is of course extremely important with art, but you can hear their story and their inspiration and really delve into discovering art. Yeah. Wild horses. You want to talk about the wild horses?
So, there I was, out in the middle of Salt River, which actually I live and back up to the Tonto National Forest. So, I was out and taking photos and saw a herd of horses cross a river. I thought, how interesting. And as time went on, there was a little colt on the other side of the river. And it seemed very interested in me, just as interested as I was in him. The colt led the herd across the river to come see me. So I was taking pictures, and I knew this was going to be a moment in time. So I had my camera out like this, and I saw them coming across, and the whole time I'm going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, don't ever forget this. This is the most amazing time in my life. And the herd came across, and for, I want to say about a half an hour, I was with my camera, and I stood just like this, and they ran around me just outside of arm's reach, wild horses. It was the most amazing experience. I have the photos of everything, and the colt nursed right 10 feet from me. The alpha was teaching him the ways of the world, nipping at him and showing him, hey, I'm still the alpha right now. And it was just so spectacular. And from that, right here at Celebration, because they do allow you to go to extents, there are no limits here. And so I knew I wanted to portray that. And it actually became one of the first bronze tables of its kind, where it is a waterfall that is all in bronze. The entire table is 100% bronze. And the horses exactly in the positions that they were in at that time are shown on this table. And I have a photo of that piece in my studio. But it was one of the most spectacular moments in my life, other than having my children, our children. It was spectacular, and we occupied the same space. There was no anxiety between anyone. It was total love. I can't even begin to explain that feeling. And then they just went off. That was it. So it doesn't get any better than that. So the Wild West is still wild. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Woo, that is awesome. Goosebumps.